Before we start, quick roll call. Tell me the city you are watching from and the exact time there right now. Keep that time in your head, because in this story, midnight is not just a clock. It is jurisdiction. The print shop that mattered sat one floor above a feed store where the floorboards always smelled like molasses. The sign on the stairwell said, Weekly Clarion, established 1887. At night, the Clarion was not a newspaper. It was a machine, a coal stove, 2 linotypes coughing out hot slugs, a makeup stone big enough to dress a man on, and a cylinder press that shook dust out of the rafters when it hit speed. The day editor, a careful man named Voss, locked his copy drawer at 6 and went home. After that, the keys belonged to the night foreman, Laurel Pike, who could run a full page with both hands while answering a telegraph from the depot without dropping a line. Laurel hired 3 types of help after dark. First, a teenage runner named Finch who hauled exchange copies to the post office and took extras to saloons at closing time. Second, a proofreader with bad eyes who could still catch a transposed digit in a tax sale. Third, a quiet man the crew called Judge on Wheels because he arrived every other week in a buggy with out-of-county plates and never gave a last name. He set his bag on the copy desk, pulled a folded packet of legal notices, and said the same thing every time. Run these where they will be seen. If you do not know newspapers, here is the part that matters. Legal notices make governments real. To levy a tax, you publish. To move a county line, you publish. To convene a special court, you publish. If the notice runs in the right paper on the right date, your paper becomes a piece of law. If it does not, all you have is a meeting with no legs. Laurel knew which statutes required how many consecutive weeks, which publications counted as of general circulation, and how to backdate a masthead if a train snowed in the mail for 2 days and the publisher insisted the Clarion never missed an issue. The Judge on Wheels did not ask for favors that would make a typesetter's hands shake. He asked for very specific placements. The top of page 2, legal column, between dissolution of partnership and livestock estrays. He wanted the notice slugged with the Clarion's postal permit number so that any clerk who checked would see a real mailer. He brought the notices already written, with the county name blank. Laurel handed him a composing stick and watched which name he fed into the slug case. Sometimes it was Chariton, sometimes it was Newton. On the nights that concern us, it was a county no one on the day crew had ever seen printed. Armitage County. Armitage did not exist on any state map, but the notice didn't say, hereby create. It said, pursuant to the act heretofore noticed, which implies the act had already been given to the people in prior weeks. The trick was sequence. If you controlled which papers carried which week numbers, you could present the 4th and final notice first in a quiet paper like the Clarion, then ship-bound exchange copies back to 3 larger dailies with a note requesting reciprocal courtesy. The dailies would print the earlier weeks as filler in their legal columns, dated prior, and the file copies in the state archives would later show a complete run. To any auditor starting at the end and paging backward, Armitage County would appear to have passed through the gate legally. Laurel laid the slugs for week 4 with steady hands and checked the date wheel. 12:01 a.m., which made it Friday by law, even if it was still Thursday in his bones. The mechanics looked innocent. Laurel set the lines on the linotype, a matrix magazine filled with brass molds, hot lead pumped from the pot, a slug cast for each line. Notice is hereby given, cooling in the galley with steam threading the air. He justified the measure to make the right edge clean, so no clerk could complain about sloppy columns. He locked the galleys into a chase on the make-up stone with coin keys, added a 1-point rule above and below, and chalked legals on the reso so the pressman would not substitute a joke item by mistake. He put a small hairline nick in the slug for the word heretofore. That nick would show in every later copy and prove whether anyone had swapped a plate. Finch watched everything because runners in small towns learn value by watching. He saw the judge on wheels unwrap a second packet. Order fixing the seat of justice. This is the notice that tells people where to bring their disputes. It named a courthouse described as temporary until a vote. The address was a crossroads that did not have a charter. Laurel questioned that one. You are moving a county seat into a township that does not exist on the assessor's books, he said flat, not as an accusation, but as a warning about subscribers. The judge gave a plain answer. The vote is in 30 days. The law says publish before the vote. The vote makes the township real. If you think that is circular, Laurel thought so too, but circular law in a border county is not rare. It is how rail sidings become towns. Voss, the day editor, kept a back cabinet marked Stereos. Inside were stereotype plates, curved metal casts of full pages used to rerun standard material without resetting type. Laurel almost never used them because he prided himself on fresh pages. The judge wanted the opposite. He wanted page frames that could be reproduced in 3 towns with only the masthead swapped and the date wheel nudged. He offered to supply zinc stereotypes of the legal column out of his own bag. Laurel refused, not out of morality, but because a plate from a stranger meant the blame would land on Laurel if a word broke state format. They compromised. Laurel set from copy, the judge watched, and Finch inked quick proofs on soft paper with a hand roller. The proofreader, Mrs. Ada Newsom, read legalese better than she saw faces. She flagged nothing in the first run. In the second run, she caught a mismatch. The body named the county Armitage, but the signature line at the bottom said, "By order of the Court of Newton County." The judge smiled like a teacher whose pupil had finally asked the right question. "Leave it," he said. "The order must be recognized by an existing court." Laurel tapped his pencil on the stone. "So your new county borrows authority from the old county, but will collect its own fines once seated." The judge did not nod. He did not have to. The men in the night shop understood money. The press started at 12:20 a.m. The cylinder 8 sheets. The frisket carried them off kissed with ink, and Finch counted out the bundles by route. Exchange copies for the State House. Mailers stamped for surrounding towns. 20 folded papers for saloons that open at 6 and prefer to talk over printed law when they argue property. The judge stamped 4 envelopes himself with addresses that meant nothing to Finch. Map room, survey office, district clerk, seat pending, assessor pro tem, and a private addressee with a hotel name that moved every week like a carnival. Laurel did one thing he had never done before. He pulled an extra impression of the legal column on clean stock and wrote at the top in grease pencil, "Holden Morgue." The morgue is the drawer where old stories go to die until a lawyer comes asking what the paper ran on a particular date. He slid the proof under the day editor's drawer and locked it. If the judge came back waving a different version, Laurel would still have the nicked heretofore to measure against. At 1:30, the telegraph bell on the desk rattled twice. The depot operator sent a short request. "Clarion, confirm postal permit 27B, printed on issue dated Friday." Laurel keyed back, "Confirmed, print completed." The permit number matters because it proves the paper mailed at the rate promised. If anyone later accused the Clarion of running a midnight special without a real mailing, the Postal Ledger would say otherwise. Abel Hart, the same postmaster from our earlier case, signed the mail sack receipt at 2:05 a.m. Finch watched him stamp the sack with Friday's date. The judge watched too, then folded his copies with care like a man counting votes. Mrs. Newsom left at 2:20 with a cough that always followed the night air. Laurel stayed to clean lead dross off the pot and toss bad slugs into the hell box. The judge did not leave. He opened his bag and laid out 2 more notices, thinner, not for this week, but for a week not yet here. "We will need week 3 in the exchange," he said. "Your man can carry it to the Chronicle and the Bee with the usual courtesy note." Finch said the Chronicle would not run an out-of-town legal without payment. The judge took out $10 in coin and set it on the stone. "That buys courtesy in most places," he said. He was not wrong. The only thing that bothered Laurel enough to write down in the shop log was a short instruction on the judge's 3rd notice. "Do not reset headline. Duplicate exactly." The headline read, in small caps, "Final notice to electors of Armitage County." Look at the I in Armitage. It was a lowercase l substituted for an uppercase I, a typesetter's shortcut, when the matrix for I is broken. Laurel had not used that shortcut tonight. He had cast clean. The judge wanted the mistake to travel because it would make all 4 weeks look like a single hand had set them. Laurel penciled an arrow at the margin of the proof and wrote "Li locked." From then on, if he saw the same wrong letter in another town's paper, he would know whose metal it was. At 3 in the morning, Finch ran the exchange bundle to the post office. Abel weighed the sack and slid it behind the counter without a word. Finch asked an impertinent question because boys who haul bundles learn to ask them. "How does a county move on paper?" Abel said. "It does not move. It arranges where you will look first." Finch did not understand then. He would when the postcard men arrived with pictures of a courthouse that could be unbolted and rolled out of a field in an hour. The day editor, Voss, found the morgue proof 7 hours later. He knew what it meant to have a separate legal proof under his drawer. He carried it upstairs to Laurel and asked a single clear question. "Do we stand behind this if the state asks?" Laurel said, "The permit is right, the date wheel is right, the notice runs in the legal column with the rules above and below, and the fee is paid." Voss asked his only other question, "Is Armitage a map county?" Laurel said, "Not yet." Voss put the proof back, closed the drawer, and said, "Then we do not miss an issue, and we do not write an editorial." The Clarion, like many papers in small towns, believed that the legal column was a service, not a position. Only later would anyone argue that the service had built a government that did not exist. That night came the test Laurel had been waiting for. A man from the Chronicle arrived with a galley tray and an apology. "We ran your week 3 as a courtesy last Tuesday," he said, "but the proof we got has a different line break on heretofore." Laurel took the tray, pulled the slug, and looked for his hairline nick. The nick was gone. Someone had reset the line from copy and failed to keep the shop's tell. He did not accuse the Chronicle man of anything. He just made a note. There were 2 sequences in play now, one with the Clarion's nick and one without, both pretending to be the same run. 2 roads to Armitage, both paved in ink. By the end of that week, the judge's wagon turned up at 3 other shops on the 4-state line. Not all said yes. The ones that did had nightmen like Laurel, who understood that legality in print is mostly timing, format, and a clerk who stamps the sack at the right minute. The ones that said no asked the judge for an order from a real bench. He smiled and tapped the bottom line. By order of the Court of Newton County. Nobody wanted to fight Newton County's paperwork over a 40-line notice at 2 in the morning. They ran the line and went home. The county moved a half-inch closer to existing every time a roller kissed ink to paper. Laurel's last entry in the nightbook for that month is short. Armitage Week 4 printed 1201. Week 3, courtesy to Chronicle and B. Permit 27B confirmed. Proof in morgue. L.I. locked. He underlined the last item and drew a box. He only drew boxes around things he might need to put in front of a judge who did not travel by wagon. They called it the traveling bench because it fit in a wagon. A collapsible oak table with a green baize top, 2 folding chairs, a wooden seal press, a tin cash box with 4 trays, a docket book already ruled for fines, and a canvas banner that read, Session of the County Court, even when the county named on the banner did not exist anywhere but in the legal column. The man who ran it used the same plain introduction in every town. Court is now in limited session for minor matters and administrative orders. He never said criminal. He never said jury trial. He said limited and meant fast. The wagon belonged to a livery 2 towns over, so no single deputy could say he had seen it twice in the same day. The driver swapped horses at the line and changed the whip socket so the rig looked different to a casual eye. They parked at crossroads that locals used like a square, but the survey never charted. A store porch, a cotton scale, the flat side of a church that did not keep weekday hours. The banner went up facing the road. The seal press sat where the sun would catch it. The first people always came for curiosity. The next came for advantage. Every session had the same 3 pieces. First, the docket, a half-sheet printed at the Clarion at night with blank lines for names and charges that were not called crimes. Ordinance fee, license remedy, assessment review, roadside encroachment, sale without posting, livestock at large. The man in the chair with the gavel wrote the county name at the top in the same neat hand he used in the Clarion's legal column. Second, the jurors. They were not jurors in the way a real courthouse means the word. They were good men of the vicinity who swore to advise the court, paid $1 each, sometimes wearing paper badges with the county name pre-printed. Third, the outcome, a stamped paper titled Order and Fee, with 2 boxes, paid on account or to be presented at seat of justice. Rented jurors is what the night crew called them when they joked over coffee at the Clarion. The truth was simpler and uglier. A small circle of men who would sit for anyone who kept the docket moving and the fee box full. The bench wanted men who would not argue theory, who would nod when an ordinance number was cited, and turn their chair a fraction so the shopkeeper or farmer at the rail could see the seal press waiting. The foreman of this group was a feed buyer named Castle, who knew everybody's debts. He would raise his hand early, volunteer a motion to recommend the fee, and the others would follow because nobody wanted to be the one neighbor who stopped a quick settlement. The judge on wheels did not start with strangers. He started with the people who had read the Clarion and seen Armitage County in print. "You saw the notice," he would say to a man blocking a ditch with a rail pile, or a woman selling eggs from a table without a posted license. The vote is set. The law expects notice and remedy. This is remedy. The man or woman would look at the banner and at the 2 chairs and at the cash box and at the jurors. They would look at the seal press as if it were a gun. And then they would look down at the half-sheet that promised $1 less if paid today. You could buy speed. That was the real product. A farmer who had been told for 3 weeks that his fence crossed the road allowance would have a paper in 10 minutes that said, "Encroachment fee satisfied," with a stamp that looked like any other county stamp. A peddler who had been warned to post his license could pay $1 more than the license itself and walk away with a stamped paper to flash at the next deputy who bothered him. A storekeeper who had advertised a sale without the proper posting could pay to turn a violation into a notice remedy. It was not justice, and it was not entirely fraud. It was a portable answer. The money moved through the tin box in a rhythm. Quarters and halves, then the dull ring of a silver dollar from a man who wanted to be done in one noise. The judge wrote receipts in a docket book pre-ruled with line numbers and a faint shadow of a watermark you only noticed if you held the page to the light. The watermark read Newton County Court, which told any careful reader where the paper had been bought. The top line on every receipt named Armitage County anyway. The jurors signed the back of each page by initial. Castle always signed in full, like a man who had nothing to hide, because everyone owed him twice what the fee cost. There was a second box under the bench that almost no one saw. It held envelopes addressed to Assessor Pro Tem and Clerk Pro Tem, and a small rubber stamp that read, Seat of Justice, Temporary. Those envelopes traveled with the wagon and went back into the judge's bag at the end of the day. If a man asked where to appeal, the judge would stamp a blank card with Seat of Justice, Temporary, and write the crossroads on it. If a woman asked whether this paper counted at the bank, the judge would say, "It counts at the county seat," and not add that the county seat itself could be folded and put back in the wagon. Once the bench warmed the square, the crew started selling the part that made the scheme permanent, recognitions. If you paid your fee today, the court would recognize a boundary, recognize a license, recognize a widow's ownership of her husband's wagon. Recognition cost a little more because it traveled. Recognition meant the Clarion printed a 3-line notice next week. The Court of Armitage County this day recognized the claim of so-and-so in small type nobody reads until they need it. That line, backed by a stamp and a signature, turned into leverage at the bank, at the granary, and most importantly, at the ballot box scheduled for 30 days out. Recognitions filled the docket faster than fines. The rented jurors played their part past the table, too. After a morning of recognitions, they scattered to porches and scales and told men what the fee was saved them. "I paid $2 and they stamped my corner stake," Castle would say, loud enough for the next man counting seed money to hear. "They will stamp yours. After the vote, you will pay twice." Whether that was true did not matter. The word twice did the work. You might ask why nobody in a real office stopped a traveling court with a banner and a cash box. The answer is that people in real offices sometimes like clean dockets and quiet weeks. The sheriff 3 towns over did not want to send a deputy to settle a fence if a stamped paper could make 2 men stop arguing. The assessor did not mind if a boundary was recognized on a docket that would be copied into a ledger next month. The bank liked a piece of paper with a seal because it looked like collateral. And the day editors liked small type that paid on time. "It is administrative," was the line the judge used, and administrative means nobody wanted to spend a night riding a horse over it. There was a mechanism for pushback, and the bench planned for it. If someone stood at the rail and demanded a real jury, the judge pointed at the banner's small print. "Session limited to petty matters." If they quoted the statute that says a county court cannot sit where the county has no charter, the judge lifted the half-sheet and tapped the line that read, "By order of the Court of Newton County," like he had in the Clarion office. If a man raised his voice, Castle raised his palm and said, "We are neighbors deciding small things, or we can pay men in town to write letters." No one wanted to pay men in town to write letters. The afternoons were for larger purchases. A store owner could prepay the year's license and walk away with a stamped receipt of intent that he believed would satisfy any inspector. A road crew boss could recognize a road as county maintained so that his gang could cut a line through a neighbor's field with fewer arguments. A foreman at the mill could recognize his weigh scale to head off a state inspection that might ask about slushed tear plates. These orders were the real money. They were also the closest the wagon came to a real crime, because the orders were written in the same book as morning fines, and the stamp did not change for the afternoon. They did one thing to keep the blade sharp. They moved the seat of justice with the weather. If it looked like rain at the north line, the judge would set the banner 2 miles south the next day and call that the seat. If the store porch in one town started asking hard questions, the wagon would go to the cotton scale in another and call it a session there. They did not return to the same crossroads twice in 1 week. They never set up within sight of a real courthouse. They never sat a session on Sunday. They kept the book neat and the cash box lighter at dusk than at dawn. They trusted the Clarion to make it look official next Thursday. The day Laurel followed the wagon with Finch was the day the bench showed its teeth. A man with a team stood at the rail and said he would not pay a fee for livestock at large because his cattle had been driven onto the road by boys throwing rocks from the cotton gin. The judge wrote "refused" on the docket line and nodded to Castle. Castle said, "Then the recognition will be withdrawn." The man asked, "Which recognition?" Castle said, "The one that lets your wagon axle count as within weight for the county road." The man looked down at the seal press. He paid the fee and said nothing more. Finch wrote in his pocketbook, not because he gathered evidence, but because stories like that sell next week's paper. They never once jailed anyone. They never once impounded a wagon. They sold time and wrote it down like law. The only thing that threatened the bench was daylight with a clerk who asked for a statute number and wanted to see the ordinance book. The judge kept the book he needed under the table. The Clarion's bound issues with 4 weeks of Armitage notices clipped at the legal column. When a clerk asked for a law, he opened to the small caps headline with the wrong letter and said, "Pursuant to the act heretofore noticed." Most clerks do not argue with print if the seal is heavy in their hand. On the last page of that month's docket, there is a single line in a different hand. Order fixing the place for receiving ballots. The place named is a churchyard gate at a crossroads that never had a charter. The jurors signed their initials. The judge pressed the seal. The wagon rolled out before supper. Real photo postcards were the internet of 1908. You could point a camera at a scene, contact print it onto postcard stock, and drop it in the mail the same afternoon. People trusted them because they were photographs with a stamp box. The judge on wheels trusted them because a picture captioned "Armitage County Courthouse" looked like proof to anyone who did not stand in that field yesterday. The postcard men showed up 2 weeks after the first traveling sessions. One carried a 5x7 folding camera and a canvas satchel of ASIO postcard stock. The other hauled props, bunting, a flagpole sleeve, 2 lengths of skirting, and a painted signboard that read, "Courthouse, Temporary." They rented the flatbed at the livery, rolled a light wooden building shell onto it, 3 walls, a false door, a window frame, and backed it against a church side wall or a store porch to fake depth. The bunting hid the seams. The signboard went at a clean angle. A crowd was posed across the front step. Click. Seat of Justice, Armitage County, was written in the negative with a needle, so it printed in white. Finch watched the first shoot from the feed store roof. He counted faces. The same 4 men reappeared at every angle. Castle, the feed buyer, 2 of the rented jurors, and a livery hand in a Sunday coat, 1 size too big. A woman with a shawl stood near the door in 3 different compositions. In one image, she is a clerk, in another, a petitioner. In the third, she simply fills a gap where the bunting sags. The camera moved. The people did not. The photographer asked them to turn their hats to change the silhouette. He swapped out the flag for a different length so the fold would not repeat. He did not change the faces. By dusk, the postcards were drying on a line in the livery yard. The captions were scratched into the emulsion backwards so they would print forward. Courthouse, Armitage County, temporary. Voters at the seat of justice. First court day, recognition docket. The photographer hand-stamped the backs with a small logo and the word real photo. Finch bought 2 at a saloon counter with his last coins. Abel Hart sold 6 more with penny stamps at the post window before noon the next day. By Sunday, a man 30 miles away could tack a postcard above his bar and say, "There it is. They have a courthouse." Not everyone saw the trick at a glance. Laurel did. He spread 3 postcards on the makeup stone under the composing room window and set a line gauge across the cornices. The same nick in the paint showed under the bunting in all 3. The cloud pattern over the roof matched exactly in 2 cards taken hours apart. The flag's shadow fell at the same angle, though the photographer claimed a different time in the caption. Laurel took a grease pencil and circled the repeated marks. "Frame on a wagon," he said. "Move the wagon, keep the frame." The postcards did more than decorate saloons. They seeded files. A bank cashier would staple one behind a loan application to show collateral existed in a county that might soon vote itself onto a map. A road overseer would pin one to a petition to shift a bridge levy to the new county. A school trustee would copy the caption into minutes to justify moving a line so his payroll came from Armitage instead of Newton. A map agent in a railroad office would clip one and tuck it into a folder labeled Proposed, County Boundaries, then ghost a dotted square onto a wall map so visiting men could nod and say they had heard of it. The judge's crew understood paper better than most. They brought a portable press to sessions in the 2nd month, a small hand-fed platen on a folding stand, inked with a brayer, locked with a form that read Tax Receipt, District Road, and Bridge. The form left blanks for name, amount, and precinct. The seal press bit the corner. The portable press made every sale look like a county function instead of a wagon sale. People paid faster when the receipt looked like bank paper. The first time the portable press printed at speed, Laurel stood behind the table and watched the numbers. The crew collected $3 a head for recognition of boundary, $2 for road assessment remedy, $1.50 for license posting remedy, and a variable take for seat of justice certificate. The jurors signed the back of each receipt as witnesses. The judge put the receipts into a folio with a string and later carried them upstairs to the Clarion to be summarized in the legal column as orders recognized. Laurel knew the circularity of it. He printed the summaries anyway because the fee cleared at the counter and the form met format. The clue that broke the postcard spell did not come from a newspaper man. It came from a school teacher who had bought 3 voters at the seat of justice cards to use in a civics lesson. She set them side by side and told the class to describe differences. A boy pointed at the sky on the left card. "Ma'am, that cloud is the same as this cloud, but flipped," he said. He was right. The photographer had printed one negative reversed to vary the look. The same woman's shawl folds fell opposite. The temporary sign serif on the T was on the wrong side. The teacher brought the cards to Voss and said, "I do not care about counties. I care about children learning to tell when a picture is honest." Voss put the cards on Laurel's stone and drew 2 lines. Flip, repeat. Pike, the federal enumerator from the last case, had been pulled into a census supplement for precinct changes. He walked through 3 towns collecting head counts on the week the postcards hit the cafes. He saw voters at the seat of justice across Oregon County, across Howell County, and across a 4th county line that did not touch either. He carried a small loop. Under magnification, the bunting stitches matched from card to card. He wrote a line and left it at the depot for Merritt Cole, the night operator. "RPPCs are not evidence. They are glue." Merritt wrote back, "The glue is sticking to payroll." Payroll was the other reason the postcards mattered. A mill foreman pinned one over the weighroom door to satisfy inspectors who asked whether their scale was recognized by the county. The judge sold recognitions to that mill on the same day he sat a docket for roadside encroachment across town. In the scale shack that night, Merritt watched a new tear plate appear on a gondola that had looked heavy last week. He ran the car and shaved the wedge value with his ear. He wrote the new net in his private book and added one word: postcard. If a picture could buy a recognition that softened a visit from a state man, then the weight tickets could be tuned a hair without the foreman sweating. Money and pictures taught each other how to behave. The portable press printed one more form that most people missed. Finch saw it when he carried ink and water. Proof of publication. Affidavit. The form certified that the Clarion had run the required notices with dates and page positions. Laurel did not hand those out. The judge did, already filled, with a space for Laurel's signature. Laurel refused to sign a blank. The judge left the form on the stone and came back after the press run with a line filled in by a steady hand that looked like Laurel's, but wasn't. Voss put the form under the morgue proof and weighed both with a slug of lead. He did not accuse anyone out loud. He filed it in the cabinet marked Stereos, where strangers would not look first. Ada Newsom, who could not see faces 6 feet away, could see type like a hawk sees mice. She noticed the L for I error in Armeltage on a postcard caption and set it next to the Clarion's legal run the judge had asked them to keep consistent. The same wrong letter held. The same hairline nick in heretofore did not. She tapped the cards with her pencil. "He wants one family of errors and none of ours," she said. "He wants to prove sameness across towns and break the trail back to this shop." Laurel circled the wrong letter and wrote in the margin, "L.I. traveled." By the 3rd week, banks began asking for a second kind of proof before lending against paper stamped "Seat of Justice, temporary." They wanted a map. The judge had anticipated this. He carried a bundle of mimeographed precinct maps with dotted lines and a square for the courthouse. The square fit whatever corner the wagon could reach. The dotted lines mirrored township boundaries from 3 different counties like a patchwork quilt. The map had a scale bar and a north arrow. It looked official if you did not lay it over a real survey. When Pike did lay it over the county survey, the river ran uphill on the judge's sheet by a half inch. He wrote "River Wrong" on a slip and dropped it under Laurel's door. The first public pushback hit on a Saturday market. A deputy from Newton County tapped the portable press with his stick and asked for the statute that allowed a temporary county to issue tax receipts. The judge did not argue statute. He handed over a fat packet, postcard of the courthouse, affidavit of publication, recognition summary clipped from the Clarion, and 3 letters from storekeepers saying the bench had quieted disputes that would have tied up the sheriff all week. The deputy looked at the packet, looked at the crowd, and decided he liked quiet. He told the judge to move 2 miles down the road so the church picnic would not have to see a cash box on the grass. The bench complied. The docket stayed full. The flaw that would matter later slid into the picture on a windy day. The crew reused their bunting after a rain, and a corner tore. The tier shows on 5 postcards mailed into 3 counties with different captions. Pike pinned all 5 to a board and strung cotton thread through the tier like a stitch. The thread lined up across all cards. He took the board to Abel and asked for the registry memoranda on the days those cards moved. Abel pointed at the corner X's. The same households that bought recognitions mailed the most postcards. The same names that showed up on night payroll lists bought postcard bundles for patrons. Laurel stared at the board and said, "He is building a majority with photographs." Finch's last errand for that month was to carry a stack of postcards to the Clarion's exchange bundle with a note. "Courtesy, please run as community interest." Laurel scratched the note out with his pencil. "We do not beg other papers to help a picture lie," he said. He kept 2 cards and slid the rest back across the counter to the judge. The judge did not argue. He had already bought space in 3 other weeklies with cash. On Monday, the Clarion's legal column carried a 3-line notice at the bottom. The Court of Armitage County this day recognized the precinct map as posted at the seat of justice. Laurel set it with his jaw tight and his hand steady. At 6 that evening, Pike nailed 5 postcards to the depot wall under a heading he wrote with chalk. Same faces, different towns. The chalk washed in the first rain. The holes in the cards did not. The first complaint that stuck did not come from a lawyer. It came from a map salesman who could not square his wall map with a petition on his desk. His name was Ellery Baines, a representative for a St. Louis publisher that printed county atlases and schoolroom wall maps. He sold laminated counties with grommets at the corners and township plats and books that bankers bought in pairs. When a bank cashier asked him to pencil in Armitage County ahead of a loan committee meeting, Ellery opened his roll, looked for the square where the courthouse should be, and found 2 rivers that argued with each other. Publishers protect their work with something called a trap street. It is a harmless invented bend or an extra alley added to catch plagiarists who copy plates without paying. On the St. Louis sheet for the 4-state Borderlands, the editor had hidden 3 trap marks: a tiny dogleg in the east fork of Mill Creek, a misnumbered range line near a county corner, and a short spur road named Clover that led nowhere. Ellery knew them by heart when he laid the judge's mimeographed precinct map over the St. Louis plate. The dogleg appeared exactly, the wrong range line matched, and Clover was typed where no local man would have bothered to name a lane. That told him the judge's crew had traced a published map and then sketched a square on top. He wrote trap in his order book and carried both sheets to the depot, where Pike would pass twice a week. Pike did not care about publishers' fees. He cared about how a trap street could prove a forgery. He took Ellery to the surveyor's office at the county seat and asked for the official plat books. The deputy surveyor, a man named Hoskins who sharpened his pencils with a knife, laid the plats on the table and ran a finger along the east fork of Mill Creek. No dogleg. He tapped the range line numbers at the county corner. Correct. He closed the book and said, "The St. Louis sheet is for classrooms. Ours is for deeds." Ellery showed the precinct mimeograph with Clover typed in a corner. Hoskins said, "There is no Clover there and never has been." Pike said, "Then someone used a school map to build a county." Hoskins said, "That is not how law works." Pike said, "It is how this one moved." Laurel and Voss at the Clarion had to decide if the paper would print a correction or an exposure. Printing corrections on legal notices risks civil trouble. Printing exposures risks fewer notices next month. Voss chose the middle, an unsigned column headlined, "On the Matter of Maps." It explained calmly that classroom maps are not legal plats and urged readers to consult the surveyor for boundary questions. It did not name Armitage County. It did not name the judge. It did not change the fact that the Clarion's legal column had carried orders recognized for a county that now ran headlong into a trap street. The judge's answer was procedural. He filed a petition with the district court to correct descriptions by reference to common usage. Common usage is a legal phrase that lets a court fix spelling or move a line a few rods to match how people have walked a boundary for a generation. The petition attached affidavits from storekeepers, jurors, and a road overseer. It attached postcard copies of the courthouse and a schedule of recognitions stamped at the portable press. It cited the Clarion's On the Matter of Maps as proof that the paper acknowledged that maps vary. It asked the court to bless the dotted lines on the mimeograph as true in substance and practice. If you are counting, that is a picture trying to pull law across a river. Hoskins, the deputy surveyor, did not file a brief. He pulled stakes. He took 2 chainmen and paced out the corners where the judge's map put precinct posts. He turned up 3 iron pins that belonged to a railroad survey and 1 cedar stake that had no blazes at all. He photographed his chain laid against each mark and wrote, "No witness tree," in his notebook. He handed the notebook to Pike and said, "If a county wants to stand, it must stand on iron and wood, not postcards." Pike put the notebook in his satchel next to Ellery's trap sheet. The satchel now held a quiet case, classroom map in the mimeograph, missing witness trees on the ground, and a petition that asked a judge to accept practice over plats. The State Survey Office sent a letter to the Division Court that should have ended it. It said, in language so dry it creaked, that no petition to fix descriptions could be heard for a county not recorded as created. It said any orders issued by a temporary seat of justice were void as orders and might stand as contracts between private parties only if both sides agreed. It said precinct maps carry no weight without a recorded order of the county court and a filed survey. It did not say the word Armitage. It did not need to. The letter was read at a morning session on the wagon bench. Castle folded it once and put it under the cash tray. The docket continued. Banks do not like uncertainty. 2 lenders who had advanced money on the strength of recognitions tied to the portable press now asked for substitutes: a deed, a recorded easement, a filed survey. When borrowers could not produce those, the banks called notes. Storekeepers who had paid to recognize their licenses learned at the next inspection that the inspector had orders to ignore any stamp not issued at a courthouse listed in the Blue Book. The judge sold a new stamp, filed for record upon creation. That meant nothing but looked like hope. people paid for hope when the bank's letter had that tone that says the sheriff will be on his horse by Friday. The first hard stop came from a map, not a marshal. The railroad's engineer, who maintained the wall-size operating diagram in the division office, refused to show Armitage County as an overlay. He said the division moved freight, not lines. Then he did something smarter. He added a faint grease pencil box around the crossroads where the wagon had set its banner and wrote "Seat" in the corner. That mark traveled because copyists traced from the division wall. In a week, 3 more offices had a faint seat near a crossroads with no charter. In 2 weeks, traveling men began to joke about paying a fee at ? The joke cut the bench in a way fines did not. A court cannot afford to be a punchline. The judge leaned harder on law. He carried a bound court record with the Clarion's 4 weeks of notices pasted in, affidavits of publication signed in someone else's careful hand, and a minute book that listed orders by number. He presented that book at a clerk's window and asked for it to be filed pending vote. The clerk, a woman who had seen too many farmers cry over a lost line, said there was no slot labeled pending county. The judge said the law did not forbid it. The clerk said the law did not imagine it. She slid the window shut and went to lunch. Pike's report to the district ended up on a state attorney's desk. The attorney did not quote trap streets. He quoted statutes. He drafted an injunction that would bar any unrecorded county from accepting fees, issuing receipts, or holding sessions. He waited to sign it until he had a marshal at the door who could carry it by wagon to the crossroads. He did not ask the Clarion to publish it. He planned to serve it cold at a session with a cash box on the table. The injunction met mud. The marshal reached the crossroads in a storm. The banner was not up. The portable press was not there. The wagon tracks turned into a pasture and stopped at a fence. A livery boy said the judge's team had taken the river road and crossed on boards. By the time the marshal reached the far side, the boards were gone. He delivered the injunction to a storekeeper who promised to hand it over. The storekeeper laid it under a stack of flour orders and forgot. The next morning, Merritt sent Pike a telegram with 3 words. Bridge washed out. The wagon could not cross where it usually did. That meant the bench would sit within reach for once. Pike and Ellery stood on the porch of the cotton gin while the men set the table and unfolded the banner. Pike did not argue law at the rail. He set Ellery's trap sheet next to the mimeograph map and asked Castle a plain question. Which one is your county? Castle looked at the dotted square on the mimeograph and at the dogleg on the classroom map and said the same thing he had said all month. The one that takes my money and stops my neighbor from stealing my fence. Pike said, That is not a county. Castle said, It is enough. Laurel sent Finch with the morgue proof of week 4 and the postcard set with the torn bunting to hold up for the jurors to see. He did not shout. He did not accuse. He let the pictures fall on the table next to the seal press. Ada Newsom, who had put on her best hat, tapped the wrong letter in Armitage with the tip of her pencil. Your county spells itself 2 different ways, she said. The judge said, So does Pittsburgh. Laurel said, Pittsburgh is on a map. The jurors shifted in their chairs. Men in a crowd like certainty. The banner flapped in the wind. The decision did not arrive as a gavel. It arrived as absence. The bank cashier did not staple postcards to loan files anymore. The railroad did not trace the square on the division wall. The Clarion stopped running. Orders recognized. The surveyor refused to certify witness trees where none stood. The postmaster stopped stapling recognitions to church rolls. The wagon could still set up a table and a seal, but no one lined up except men with small problems and exact change. The bench became what it had always been without the paper scaffolding, a place to buy speed and put off a fight. The vote day that was supposed to make Armitage real arrived with rain and a sluice of mud down the crossroads. The place for receiving ballots named on the docket was a churchyard gate. The sexton kept the gate shut. The judge unfolded the banner and tied it to a fence post. He set the seal press on the table and called the session to order. Pike stood with his black book and wrote the hour. Ellery held a folded wall map with no square for Armitage. Laurel watched for the first man with a ballot in his hand. None came for 30 minutes. Castle arrived late, looked at the clouds, and asked if a vote counted if only 6 men signed. The judge said the law required notice and a place. He had both. Castle said his name anyway. 5 more followed, and then a boy, and then a woman who wrote her maiden name because she did not like her husband enough to share his. Pike wrote the number on a line and closed his book. No courier came to carry the returns. No clerk opened a window to receive them. The judge put the folded ballots in the docket folio, pressed the seal over the flap, and said he would take them to the district. Ellery did not follow. Laurel did not run an extra. Merritt clicked a short wire to the division office. Armitage vote held in rain. Bridge out. No bell. The operator at the other end sent back a single question mark. Pike took the wet banner from the fence, rolled it tight, and set it on the wagon seat. He kept the trap sheet and the survey notes. The wagon rolled away down a road that led to 3 counties and none.